What did you make of the Prime Minister's announcement from Karratha in WA yesterday that they'll have a scoping study for millions on the table? If the project goes ahead, we're talking many multiples of billions. But does this tell us that Labor's dropping its fossil fuel phobia?
Well, Peter, I always say that the best way to view politics is to watch what governments do rather than to listen to what they say. And this is a fairly significant thing for the Prime Minister to be doing, to try and look at a way of shoring up Australia's energy security and particularly its liquid fuel security. So you have to give him points for that. And the truth about the way that Australia actually is run and the energy that it runs on is 96% of our energy. So once we get away from electricity, but all of the energy that we use to run this country, 96% of it comes from coal, oil and gas. And that's a truth that's not going to change in the short term. And we know that we are severely liquid fuel insecure at the moment. So good on the Prime Minister for doing that. And it does give you a nod in the direction of travel of this government.
Okay, well, just staying with this then, you will have seen the story that broke late this afternoon in The Australian, that you've got all these heads of government around the world who are saying no to Chris Bowen. They're not going to come to the latest climate change talkfest that he is promoting. I think it's in October this year in Fiji. He's spent many millions booking all the luxury hotel rooms. Well, they'll all be no-shows. Again, if you look at data centres, if you look at net zero, even Tony Blair says that's got to go. Are we seeing a shift here, Chris, given what you've also witnessed overseas?
Peter, there is undoubtedly a shift, which Chris Bowen, of course, refuses to acknowledge. One of the many things that he said, which is flat out wrong, which is that no one around the world that he talks to is talking about getting more oil and gas. Well, he must have missed the statement that was put out by Mark Carney, who formerly was a champion, of course, of net zero, about the fact, and he made no bones about this, that Canada's emissions are going to rise because he's going to lean more heavily into the natural resources of that country to make the most of them, to make sure that Canada uses the real strength that it has in oil and gas. He's opening up a new pipeline. He intends to export gas into the export markets into which we export them. So right round the world understands now that energy security trumps everything else. And what Chris Bowen says and does is in some ways a sideshow, but I would say a very expensive one for Australia. And we continue to pursue policies which will in the long run make us a poorer nation. So it's good to see the federal government in some fronts, like when it comes to liquid fuel security, has the memo. It's certainly lagging when it comes to others. And if it actually believes that it will deliver productivity on the energy path that it's on, then it's deluding itself.
The latest polls, Chris, we just read the Sky Pulse poll. There's an uptick there for Angus Taylor. I think a steadying of the One Nation vote. Still bad polls for Labor. The government's really gone, I think, hard now after One Nation. They lampooned them for so long. The Prime Minister always, going after Pauline Hanson as some sort of joke. But now he's become very full frontal in his attack. So too the Treasurer. Here he was today.
The very dangerous risk that One Nation poses to wages and working families in this country. And the thing about One Nation is there is no way that the Liberals and Nationals can govern without being in coalition with One Nation. And those three parties, that three-ring circus, they share a very divisive anti-worker agenda.
And mate, this mirrored, I guess, the rationale we saw yesterday from Ben Carroll. It was all about the polls. That's why Jacinta Allen went. It was craven self-interest from Labor MPs who wanted to keep their seats. But he made it himself all about the risk come November of a coalition One Nation government in Victoria. What do you make of this?
Well, it's politics 101 for the Labor Party. It's what I would be doing at the moment, which is to paint your opponent as a risk, to paint One Nation in particular as unpredictable, inexperienced, and certainly a danger of a vote, a risk of a vote, and that he's trying now to put everyone in the same pot. So essentially to say that the fractured right-hand side of Australian politics is unfit to govern. And unfortunately, it's true to a certain extent that they keep offering proof points to this, so that One Nation and the coalition at the moment are certainly, the One Nation in particular is certainly making up some ground. But unfortunately, it's really hard to pin One Nation down as to what they would be and what they would do in government. I've got to say, when it comes to Victoria, who leads One Nation in Victoria? If people want an option, and if that option really isn't there, if it looks to them like the coalition and One Nation's going to be a risk, then it forces them back into the Labor Party's ticket. So, of course, this is the sort of thing the Labor Party would do, and it would be helpful if the coalition and One Nation didn't provide proof points so often that they were incapable of governing.
Good day, and here is a sentence that should worry anyone paying attention. The party running this country is fighting a war on energy, a war on One Nation, and a war with itself all at the same time, and it is only winning one of those fights by accident. Quick favour before we continue. If you love this breakdown, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Many of you watching right now have not subscribed yet, and it genuinely helps this channel keep digging into stories like this one. Costs nothing, takes a second, means the world. Right, back to it.
I guess, though, in aggregate terms, Chris, a few things it says to me. It says to me, clearly One Nation's showing up in internal party polling for Labor. Not the published polls, not the stuff that we see, but that really fine drill-down polling that only a political party does. So it's there. The PM wouldn't have made it such a feature of the National Conference the other weekend if it wasn't. But also, if you look in aggregate terms, and they're not a multi-party coalition yet, or of any shape or form, on the centre-right, but you have got this concentration of anyone but the government vote, anyone but Labor, and that's occurring federally and certainly occurring in Victoria. And Labor, rather than I guess take the concerns of people who have left them seriously, they're now wheeling around and attacking One Nation supporters. Now, I say to the Liberals, don't do that either. Fight the ground, the policy ground where the differences are, but don't attack people who've left you. Labor got to be careful about that as well.
Yeah, certainly, and I'm sure that in working class suburbs that One Nation is mopping up the discontent that people see there. But the problem that we've got in the two-party preferred system is I see a lot of people who just add up the One Nation vote and the coalition vote and think, hey, presto, that transforms into government. Well, no, it doesn't. Not if it fractures and those preferences spray everywhere. And that's what the government does know. So if the Victorian Labor Party can lift its primary vote high enough, and that will not necessarily be that high in this day and age, then it's back in this fight. So, and it's obvious that what you would do is try and work on the weaknesses of your opponent. The biggest weaknesses of the right-hand side of politics at the moment is it's absurdly divided and looks completely disorganised. So that's a problem, certainly a problem for Jess Wilson in Victoria.
Let's play this comment from someone you know well, I know well, our former Labor frontbencher, Mike Kelly.
The bad news is that there's these elements that are rising within the Labor movement that have this, unholy alliance between extreme revolutionary Marxists and Islamist extremists that are trying to pervert the party. And their goal is not a two-state solution, which is aligned with Hamas, because Hamas doesn't support a two-state solution.
All right, we've both seen what the politics of radical Islam's done to the left in the United Kingdom. Is that where Labor's headed in Australia?
Oh, look, we've seen certainly, the latest iteration at the Labor Party conference of the push, which has been coming from the left forever. Look, as long as I can remember, that there's always been a debate over how the wording should be on the Labor Party's attitude to the state of Israel. And usually, the sanity did prevail. And now what we've seen is that it gets chipped away at time and time again at these conferences. And I'd have to say that a large section of the party, the Parliamentary Labor Party, and certainly a large section of the base of the Labor Party now is completely split with the state of Israel. It is actively hostile to it at the moment. And that's the frustration you can hear coming out in someone like Mike Kelly, who is a good friend and, a man of enormous principle. he's been fighting the good fight for what he believes to be the right thing, and what I agree with him is the right thing on our attitude to the state of Israel. But I'm afraid that I think that the fight is lost inside the Labor Party now, certainly within the membership, and I'd say pretty much too within the Parliamentary Labor Party. So we've seen another step towards moving away from the state of Israel and the support the Labor Party had historically given it, and that will continue.
Let us start with energy, because the whole world just had a wake-up call. Britain is quietly reversing course on North Sea oil and gas. Canada is expanding fossil fuel production under a government that used to preach the opposite, and even Labor politicians overseas are cutting energy taxes because voters are furious about their power bills. Meanwhile, here at home, 96% of Australia's total energy still comes from coal, oil and gas, not electricity, total energy. So while the government talks up renewables targets, the actual machinery of the country, the trucks, the factories, the fuel security, is still running on the old stuff, largely unaddressed. It is like renovating the kitchen while ignoring that the foundations are cracked. Which brings us neatly to the next problem, because when your own policy has holes in it, the easiest move is to point at someone scarier, and that is exactly the play with One Nation. Labor strategists are increasingly painting One Nation as chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous to your wages, your job, your mortgage. Sounds urgent, does it not? But scratch the surface and it is pure vote arithmetic. Internal polling shows One Nation picking up disaffected voters, so the strategy is not to win people over, it is to scare them back into the fold. That is a short-term sugar hit, not a long-term plan, and voters can usually smell the difference. And finally, the crack that might matter most, because while Labor is busy fighting everyone else, it can't stop fighting itself. The ideological battle over Israel inside the party has gone from awkward to open warfare, with warnings from within Labor's own ranks about extremist influences pulling the party away from its traditional foreign policy stance. When a party can't agree on its own values, voters notice, and trust erodes quietly in the background while the headlines focus elsewhere. So here's the pattern: an energy policy that ignores the fuel security problem, a political strategy built on fear rather than a genuine alternative, and a party divided against itself on questions of basic principle. None of these problems come from the opposition. They are self-inflicted, every one of them. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.